All right, everybody, welcome back. We got a longer passage today, so I'm just going to jump in. I think it's a really cool passage to uh, enlighten us as to what Vergil's sort of philosophical views are about death. He's definitely dabbling in some uh, marginal kinds of beliefs, Stoicism, Pythagoreanism, mixing these philosophies together and coming up with a kind of interesting and odd view of the underworld and reincarnation. And it definitely had an influence because every school kid read this Aeneid, and so their view of the underworld would, from childhood, would be something like this, and so it must have been very influential in later generations of Romans. So let's jump right in and get started here. We begin with meanwhile. Aeneas, the subject, sees in a hidden vale a seclusum nemus, a secluded grove. Nemus being accusative third declension. And rustling brush of a forest. And Lethe the river, which flows through, literally this is the word for swimming, as if the river itself is swimming through the grove, flowing through placid homes. So, meanwhile, Aeneas sees in a hidden vale a secluded grove and the rustling brush of a forest. And he sees the river Lethe, which glides through placid homes. Around this, talking about the river, Circum hunc, we've seen in Vergil quite a bit this use of anastrophe, that is getting the word order in reversed or different than we would expect it to be. And here's an example of that. So by now you're used to that in Vergil, hunc circum instead of circum hunc, like you would see in prose. Anastrophe is what that's called. Around this, innumerable races and people flit about. And just as, there's Veluti, and just as when, I would move the ubi next, when in fields or in meadows, bees in the serene summer, incedent, settle on various flowers, and funduntur. I'm going to say that that is a middle use of the verb, meaning that they're acting on themselves, and they pour themselves out around the white lilies. And all the field hums, strepit, with a murmur. So funduntur, there's the middle use of the verb funda, which means to pour out, but when you put it in the passive, but you have it in a middle sense, that means they're doing it to themselves. They pour themselves out around the white lilies. And you say, well, how do we know it's a middle? It could be a passive, just in the passive sense, they are poured out, but then that leaves the question, who poured them out? The idea is that they poured themselves out. So you just have to go by context, and it will tell you when they're doing something to themselves. Aeneas, unknowing. Horescit, shudders. And what does he shudder at? He shudders at the sudden sight, the subito visu. Visu being a fourth declension verb, and that's the ablative. Aeneas, unknowing, shudders at the sudden sight, and requirit, seeks the causes or seeks an explanation. Here's the indirect question. What are these rivers over there? Or what people with such a great throng have filled the banks? So these are in the subjunctive mood because they are indirect questions. Then Father Anchises responds, is understood. They are souls to whom, quibus, second bodies are due, debentur, by fate, fato. So souls, I guess just we got a main verb, so let's just say souls to whom second bodies are due by fate. At the water of the river Lethe, drink potent, freeing waters, waters that cause you to be carefree, and they drink long forgetfulness. We call this rhetorical device zeugma, when the verb really applies to only one of the objects. You can drink waters that cause you to be carefree, but you can't really drink long oblivion, but you get the idea. And it's just a rhetorical, poetic device we call zeugma. I desire. There's cupio down there. To relate, memorare. These to you, and face to face to show them for a long time. So we could say, I have desired, since you've got that yam pretum in there, even though cupio is a present, he's saying it's been present for a long time. So I have desired now for a long time to tell you about these and to show you them face to face and to count up in numerara this offspring of mine, meorum, quo. Sometimes quo is equivalent to ut, showing purpose, so that litera, that is equivalent to literis, second person of a deponent verb, so that you might rejoice with me more, with Italy having been found. Okay, reperta Italia I take as an ablative absolute. Litera is an alternate form of literis. Look in your forms under the deponent verbs and you'll see that form litera as an alternate form of literis. Quo meaning so that, equivalent to ut, showing purpose. I have desired for a long time to tell you about these and to show them to you face to face, coram, to count up this offspring of mine, so that with me you might rejoice the more with Italy having been found. O Father, putandum est. He's asking a question. That's why we have the ne on the on. The on is just, showing that he's puzzled. So it's difficult to translate. Putandum est is a passive periphrastic construction showing obligation. Literally, must it be thought? Are we to think, in other words, that, so remember we're talking about souls throughout all of this. Some souls go, so this is indirect speech. Are we to think that some souls go from here, hink, to heaven, or to the sky above? There's animus right there, so those two are connected. And sublimis, that's modifying animus as well, soaring upwards, are returned. This is infinitive of indirect speech. Again, to slow bodies, to sluggish bodies. O Father, are we to think that some souls go from here to the upper air and soaring aloft are returned again to sluggish bodies? What, understand, is such dire desire of light for poor souls? So Lucas is a genitive, You have a dire desire of light for poor souls. What is this dire desire of light for poor souls? Decom, that's a future, I will say, and I will not hold you suspended, or in suspense, we would say, child. Anchises began and laid out, or opened up, laid out each and everything, the details, the singular, in order. All right, this gets a little complicated, but we can do it. In the beginning, principio, it's just almost like an adverb. We'll mark it that way. In the beginning, a spirit within. You have to drop down here to get the verb. Nourished. What did it nourish? It's going to nourish the accusatives, the sky, and the earth, and the watery fields. That's seas. And the shining globe of the moon. And the Titanian stars. And having been infused throughout its parts, its limbs, literally its limbs, as if the universe has a body and limbs and so forth, having been infused through its structure, the mind agitates the whole structure and mingles itself in the great body. So spiritus and mens are being equated here. Or maybe not. I think they are, though. Mens is part of the spiritus. So in the beginning, a spirit within nourished the sky and the lands and the seas and the shining globe of the moon and the Titanian star, and a mind poured through an intelligence, you see, and poured through the parts, stirred up or drove the whole mass, and mixed itself in the great body. From there, the race of men and beasts and the lives of flying creatures and what monsters the sea bears under the marble water. So Inda almost has a verbal idea built into it. So you can say, from there comes the race of men and cattle, and the lives of flying creatures, and what monsters the sea bears under the marble water. Notice how he says three things, basically. Things that live on the earth, things that live in the air, and things that live in the sea. But he never let it get boring. He expressed them in two different ways. Genus, right? The race of, and then he switches to the lives of, and then in the next one he has the sea bearing or containing what monsters. So what monsters the sea contains underneath its marble water. So 3 different ways to express 3 different things. He never lets his poetry get stale or predictable or boring. All right, we move along. There is a fiery energy for them and a celestial origin for their seeds. I know the note says germs or something like that, but the word just basically means seeds. There's a celestial origin for their seeds. To the extent that quantum, harmful bodies, and earthly limbs, and mortal members do not, I guess there's 2 verbs, so I'm going to say, so far as quantum harmful bodies do not slow down, and earthly limbs and mortal members dull, blunt, dull, impede. Okay? So what he's saying is that all these creatures were born and they have a connection to the ethereal, to the heavenly, to the divine, and it's within. They have a spiritual, fiery energy, and fire, you see, is the most ethereal thing. It's the thing that's we see up in the heavens, the stars and so forth. They have a innate celestial origin, but only so far as the body doesn't get in the way. From this, that is their bodies, they fear and they desire. The gods don't have that, you see. Why don't the gods have that? We have a divine element within us as well. The reason they don't have it is because they don't have the bodily element that we do, the lowly, earthbound element. So from this, the bodily element, souls, human beings, fear and desire. They grieve and they rejoice. Nor do they discern, despiciant, the heavenly air. That's how he's using this aros. Is the heavenly air from which they sprung, you see. Nor do they discern the heavenly air, shut in as they are. So the clausi modifies the they. Shut in the darkness and the blind prison. Blind, that's probably not the best word. Dark prison. How about that? Queen. Something like queen at means something like, yes, even with the last light, that is on the last day, life leaves. However, not all evil, nor all bodily plagues, not all evil, nor all bodily plagues leave excadent completely from poor mortals. Penitus necessa est, and surely it must be that many things long ingrained inolescera set in marvelous ways. So the concreta might go with the modis muris. If it does, then you could say, surely it is necessary, it is completely necessary that many things ingrained in marvelous ways for a long time set in inolescera. By the way, that root, sc, in Latin, and then into English, means coming to be. Pubescence, adolescence, that sc in there is a root that means it's starting to happen. Senescence. Therefore, because human beings, they die, you see, and but because their bodies so stained their souls, their divine part, that their divine part, even after death, and it separates from the body, still has the stain deep within it. Therefore, they are exercinter, they're busied with punishments, and they pay punishments. So they're busy with penalties, and they pay punishments for old sins. Some insubstantial souls are stretched out, suspended to the winds. For others, under a vast gulf the infected wickedness is washed away, or exurator is burned away by fire. Each one of us, because look at this, he's using the first person plural with that each one. So each one of us, I would say, suffers patimor. We're talking about the passion of Christ, right? Patior is related to that. It means to suffer, endure. Each one of us endures our own manes. Now, this is crazy because manes are those spirits of the departed, but Virgil was using this word manes as something different. And I mean, you could spill a lot of pages on how Virgil's using the word manes here and why. Your note, your vocabulary there at the bottom, I think, says lot in Hades, as if your manes is also your lot. So it's an interesting question, but it's a beautiful phrase, though. Each one of us suffers our own manes, whatever that might mean, because manes is what's left of us after we die normally. So to press on, each one of us suffers our own manes. Exinda. Next, we are sent through ample Elysium. So those people in the Elysian fields have gone through some sort of purgatory process, you see. You can see where this idea of purgatory comes from. The stain has to be washed off a while, or burned off, or whatever it is, before you can make your way to the Elysian fields. We are sent through the ample Elysium, and we few hold the happy fields. I don't know why it's a few. That's an interesting question. Does that mean a lot of people are being tortured in Tartarus forever? Or does that mean it just takes so long to get people out, get the stain washed off, or sometimes it can't be washed off? Or does that mean that so many have moved on to the river Lethe? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Until the long day in the completed circuit of time takes away the ingrained stain and leaves a pure ethereal sense and the fire of simple heavenly air. All of these, that's accusative. I think we're talking about the souls. When Wowera, that's a syncopated form, when they have rolled the wheel of time, through 1,000 years, the god calls them to the river Lethe in a great throng. Namely, so that without memory, they might again revisit the vaults above and begin incipient to be returned. That's passive infinitive right there. And might begin to wish to be returned into bodies. Okay, so some interesting stuff there. Uh, I'd love to hear your discussions. Press on. It was a nice, complicated passage. I don't have all the answers. No one really does, but you get the sense of what Vergil is talking about. People are in Elysium and they drink from the river Lethe, and they forget, and then when they have a blank slate, they're ready to go to the world above and start over again in a second life.